Okay. Fear, concern, optimism, enthusiasm, pessimism, all human emotions. And what evokes these human emotions is something as simple as technology. We are all humans who feel all these various things when we look at technology, right? Just yesterday, there was a report which talked about that automation will take away 20 million jobs, manufacturing jobs, by 2030, right? The report also talked about other things, how the jobs will grow, but this was the main headline, which was on BBC, for example, right? So what we are going to talk today about is how do we humanize technology through augmented intelligence? Do you really think whether if intelligence becomes artificial, the only thing which will remain human is stupidity? So we'll talk about some of these things, and we have a great panel with us today. So let me introduce the panel to you. Oliver, who is the CEO and co-founder of Visenze. He is an ardent advocate of innovation. He started Visenze in 2012. He has held leading roles at different startups, at corporate development roles, and leading brands in Singapore. And he's member of Forbes Technology Council, advocating responsible technology. And more interestingly, he is such an ardent fan of AI that even the photographs that he clicks, he prefers no humans in those photos, right? Next to him is Fengyuan. Fengyuan is co-founder and chief executive officer at Basis AI. Now, he has been at both sides of the fence. So he was in government with LTA, MTI, and more recently with GovTech. But for the last 10 months, he is an entrepreneur looking at business Basis AI, where he's building scalable, accountable AI products to help enterprise unlock growth, create personalized experiences, and manage risk, right? And finally, I have Dr. Sinuhe Arroyo, who is a wartime CEO, not just any CEO, a wartime CEO and founder at Taiger. He has been a technopreneur with a dash of economics built in here, there, right? And he has been building Taiger for since almost last 10 years, where what he does is to help financial institutions increase operational efficiency and expand operations to increase revenue by leveraging on AI-powered knowledge work automation. So as you will see, very diverse panel. As you will see, diverse use cases, diverse things we are talking about. So welcome to all of you to the panel. So we hear a lot of negative news about, the AI will take away jobs and all those things. So maybe I'll start on a more positive note. What are some use cases where you will see from your work, what you have been doing, where you see that technology is actually augmenting humans? So maybe I'll talk to Oliver and Sinuhe for this.
Sure, let me start this. So Visenze is a image search engine for retail, as simple as that. We focus on solving problems in retail that is related to search, efficiency, search and discovery, helping consumers buying products that they're looking for. So when we do that, we use a lot of data to train our models, to recognize, extract intelligence from images, and use this intelligence to help retailers recommend better in terms of their products that they're looking for, or simply equipping users with more information that they can decide. So one of those things that we've been working on, other than in the online world, recommendation engines, is to work with retailers to merge both online as well as offline experiences. All right. If you look at some of the studies around, 69% of all millennials in the U.S. Start their journey on the online world, and then they move into the offline world. And the same number is roughly about 70% from the offline world to the online world as well. So there is no distinction insofar as shopping journeys and shopping experiences are concerned. So what can we do to use AI to help merge these experiences together? So one of those things that we've been working on is working with retailers to equip their sales associates with handheld devices that are powered with smart algorithms that would allow them to take a picture or process images and celebrity photos from Instagram itself that are being passed to them by their customers, and use the intelligence from these social media images, and the social associate becomes more empowered with machine recommendations that they can then recommend to the shopper who actually walks into their store. Right? Sometimes the fear amongst this sales associate is that when you have a very sophisticated client, a fashionista who walks into the store, they are so fearful because the customer knows more than the sales associate. All right, and they're always struggling, and they can't say, "Hey, hang on a minute, let me call my fashion consultant back home or in HQ to actually recommend something to you." If they have the ability to basically use that image or some vectors that are being suggested to them, then there's an opportunity to then recommend something that is useful to the client. So this is one way in which we are now putting smart algorithms into the hands of sales associates in the store, all right, and making them look smarter and more intelligent in front of the clients.
Sinuhe, you have some comments on this, on the use cases?
Yeah, well, by way of introduction as well, Taiger is a young business, is pioneering the next generation of AI solutions. And what we do really is use human-like intelligence to read, understand, and extract information from documents. This could be applied to a number of areas. We are currently focused mostly in the financial industry. We also serve the government of Singapore extensively, and we are also touching in some other areas like legal and logistics, shipping, etc. I think the most important here is to understand what is the capacity of the software and what the software is able to do good, and what is the human or the person able to do good, and how that synergy can be empowered and augmented. So we see applications where it's straightforward. There is no enough people or not people at all interested in completing this task. So we were discussing before this example in insurance where they have to process claims, let's say, for the sake of the exercise, and they don't find enough people, enough talent to do it. So that's something where we see the software complementing the person. But the most important thing here, Paul, is to understand what is the value of the software, right? It's the computing capacity, the speed, where the person might be, I mean, obviously we don't have that computing capacity, not even we want to be close, but the soft skills are very important, right? So that synergy, that complementarity in having the software do what it does very, very good, but let the person have the last say in make these complicated decisions based on the parameters that. All in all, it's about making a positive impact in society, putting the stress in the software where we think is positive, is good, and have the person be complemented and be augmented by performing these tasks that first we don't want to do, or secondly, we don't find interesting to do, so that we can focus on more cognitive value-adding tasks.
So I think that's a very interesting point, and I think you touched a bit upon the skill part, and we'll talk a bit later about the skill. So maybe Fengyuan, maybe moving on to you, how do you see, you have been on both sides of the fence, right, to say that, and we have now DISG, which is basically going to merge the fence or break the fence between the government and the industry. So just wondering, how far do you think are we from the reality of augmented intelligence? Or are we there already?
There's so many different terms being used, artificial intelligence, and now you use augmented intelligence. But I prefer this notion of augmented intelligence, and I think the two examples that were shown were really kind of augmenting the intelligence of human beings, right? Allowing the salesperson to look good in front of the customer. So, and I think as Sinuhe also said, it's really about finding where the tasks are better dealt with by an algorithm or machine, and where AI still struggles, and it's better to get kind of human beings involved. So I think augmented intelligence is something that I think we're already closer to. The AI and machine learning are good at very specific tasks. The idea that you have some form of general intelligence, I think, is a lot further away. So I think for companies and startups looking at the use of AI, I think that's the best way to think about it, right? How can it augment parts of the way you do business? But finding that right spot, I think, is the tough part. And it doesn't help that there's so much hype and discussion that it's hard to distinguish science fiction from research from what's actually possible. So I think what we're trying to do at Basis AI now is really do two sides of the coin, right? How do you accelerate the deployment of, I will use the term machine learning algorithms within your company, i.e. algorithms that are learning from data, but how do you govern them properly? And I think you need to think about both. It's not about slowing things down, it's about accelerating them, but better governing these systems so that you know what data the machine learning algorithm is trained on, so that it's not a black box, so that when it runs predictions, you don't get implicit biases against people of certain gender or certain race. And you need to be able to make trade-offs in an enterprise. And so we really think it's about the combination of accelerating but also governing AI that's very important.
So Oliver, from your experience, and you have been doing a lot on computer vision, how do you see, how far do you think we are from are we at a reality where machines are already complementing humans? How do you see that?
I see that happening every day, actually. We use the term artificial intelligence very loosely, right? Because everybody speaks it, AI, AI, AI. But AI is already permeating our daily lives in more ways than one, in many, many ways that we don't even see ourselves, all right? When you walk into a store itself, the store is able to pull out all of your past purchases and understand what you've been buying regularly from this store. Just imagine the potential that all of this information can be used constructively and productively to simplify your everyday life, for instance. So whether is it in shopping itself or in medical care or in transportation, I think transportation is where you see everyday algorithms at work. All right, I want to get from this point to that point, all right, in the fastest time possible given the traffic conditions. It is real-time algorithms at work in real-time situations, predicting what is the fastest way for you to move from point A to point B and still arrive there in the meeting. So I see that as already happening. If we are talking about AI in general being, a decider for our lives, I don't see that happening today. All right, as in machines is going to decide what am I going to eat. Machine is going to decide what am I going to wear. Certainly not. Okay, I think that's a future situation further down the road.
So Sinuhe, from your perspective, when you are doing a lot of workforce automation, or rather a lot of automation in the workplace, do you see that you are removing certain jobs, or do you still see them as more complementing the workers who are already doing the different job roles there?
I think we're definitely complementing what they are doing. Basically, we allow them to do more, if you will, cognitive complex tasks, something that is more, suited to the interests even of the person, eliminating that repetitive, necessary but not very fulfilling part of the work, right? And I think it's a way to get more operational efficiency from all of us, and really cultivate those skills that we really want to empower. So for us, we see it on a constant basis. We don't see a decrease on the headcount in the installations that we deploy. We see an increase in the business value that we deliver, an increase in the reach that this business function can have in terms of reaching more customers, servicing them faster. But that allows the company to do more with the same resources, right? So that's what we're seeing.
Sure. So, what I'm hearing is that in current state, where we have with different technology tools, whether you are talking about AI or other tools, they are still more complementing in nature. But to address the big elephant in the room, do you think in the future, in the next 5 years, 10 years down the line, machines will replace humans? And if yes, why? And if no, why not?
I don't think so. I think some of the things that we do today will be happy to have more software, I like to put it this way, do it. Many of the things that we do we will continue doing. And it's about having a positive impact in society and deciding what things we feel comfortable having the software do and which things we don't feel comfortable. And that goes also for decision making and whatnot. I mean, the ability of a software to make a decision could be wrong, could be right. It is our control to assess whether we want that to happen or not. So.
Fengyuan, you have a view?
Yeah, I agree with Sinuhe. I think it's a long way away. There's, when we use the term artificial intelligence, there's so many connotations. And when we work with technology, it's really about software, about algorithms. There's no discussion of consciousness and how you even kind of come to that and even emotions. So I think it's a very long way, and I think that the term is overloaded. And I think I think you have to remember that artificial intelligence is an evolution, right? Some people say it's what's not been invented before. I mean, a calculator, does calculations faster than human beings can. It was invented many years ago. In some way, it's very rudimentary artificial intelligence. We've come a long way since then. And the type of cognitive tasks that AI can do has evolved in a much more sophisticated way than adding numbers. And that's just the march of technology, and it will continue to evolve. And I think we're still a very, very long way, though, from replacing human beings. Yeah.
Oliver?
Yes, it's a question which I often faced. So my personal view to this is to rephrase the question rather than say, will AI replace humans? The way that I look at it is, can AI automate some of the mundane, repetitive tasks that we do on an everyday basis that helps the humans make better decisions, make more informed decisions to help the audiences and their stakeholders that they do, that they serve. A lot of what we do today, because of the huge volumes of data that exists out there, we end up either spending a huge amount of time collecting the data, cleaning the data, extracting intelligence from the data so that we can arrive at a decision point. It's almost humanly impossible. In fact, I would say it's humanly impossible given the growth of data that there is today. How is it possible that, at this present moment, if you were to ask me, hey, Oliver, can you just go through like 10,000 videos in the next one day and tell me what are the trending fashion patterns that you see inside there? I can't do that. How many man-hours do I need to sit in front of 10,000 videos to do this? If there are certain questions, like for instance, regards to like colors or certain patterns that you want to discover from that, we can very, very quickly process the frames and extract the right colors or the patterns that you're looking for, and put all of this on a dashboard that allows for the fashion consultant to then say, hey, all right, I think based on what I'm seeing right now, okay, yellow seems to be in vogue, all right, what can we do to create new designs around these colors? It is helping humans arrive at a decision point, all right, and especially in areas as subjective as fashion, all right, or as nuanced as writing a story. We can use AI to replace the task that human being used to do, collecting and crunching all of this data, all right, that we can then save and be more intelligent and make all of the smart recommendations a lot faster than what we used to do, all right. Let me give you another example, all right. Buzzfeed, all right, in the US, everybody knows that. The way that Buzzfeed does is that they have a bunch of editors to basically, write mini stories, bite-sized stories that you can actually consume very, very quickly just by monitoring all the events out there. So, and American audiences love that very much because it's bite-sized. They can actually ingest it very, very quickly. But as the volume grew, how do you basically start to monitor all of this events and all of these news that's happening in real time? Comes in Jingre Toutiao from China, if you've heard about that. What they do is that they have algorithms to basically monitor all of these events that's happening in the real world, all right? Which is more important? There are certain algorithms that ranks the importance of these events and generate little storylines around it that allows for the human editors to then publish them according to importance. Can you see how they have bettered what Buzzfeed has done? All right, and making all of these news more bite-sized and more relatable to what is going on, and they do it at 3 times much faster than what Buzzfeed actually does today.
So what I'm hearing is two things or two themes coming out of it. One is the fact that right now the current state of development where we are with AI, it's more about replacing tasks which are more repetitive in nature rather than replacing the entire worker. So that's one. The second is that even when companies or your clients are coming to you, they are not coming to you with use cases that I want to replace some workers. They are either coming to you that there are some tasks which they want to automate so that their workers can deliver better services, or they are coming to you for tasks where they cannot find the skilled people in their countries. So is this understanding correct?
Do more with the same.
Yeah.
Do 10 times more with the same resources. Do 10 times faster. Less errors. But let the decision of whether this goes or not to the human. I think the main point is about connecting the dots, right? That reasoning ability. If you don't give predefined rules to the software as to how to connect the dots, it's not going to make it, right? And that's the soft skill. The hard skill, the computing capacity, we're not going to compete in there. But in the soft skill, in connecting the dots, this is where we excel. So it's understanding that where are we best at and put the weight so that the whole ecosystem benefits.
Okay. So I think, but there is still a fear in the minds, from a social aspect, there's a fear that intelligence, machines, technology will replace jobs. In fact, I was just looking at some data, and in the last 10 years, the global workforce or labor force has increased by 11%, but actually the number of unemployed people has gone down by almost 1%, right? So while we talk a lot about the fear of machine replacing humans, the reality on the ground is something totally different, right? So how do we, get over this fear? How do we bring the real picture out in the open? And how do you see the role of AI companies in bringing the truth out? So how, maybe, Oliver?
Bringing the truth out. Okay, that's a hard one, all right? So all three of us are AI companies, and the reason why we sit here is because we want to demystify AI. We want to present a more truthful view of how to use and embrace AI. There's always that constant fear about AI replacing jobs because it's a politically loaded question. It's very, very difficult to answer that, But you're right. In some studies, if you look at, there was one study that came out last year in 2018. It says that about 65% of all students who have entered elementary schools in the US today, by the time they graduate from universities, college, they will be employed in jobs that do not exist today. Think about those jobs being created, all right, 10 years, 15 years from now. I think if anybody, this is my view, my personal view, if anybody thinks that, you could do the same old job that you did the last 10 years for the next 10 years, I think we're living in fool's paradise, all right? AI will permeate our lives, whether we like it or not, but it's going to it's going to create new ways of doing things faster, more efficiently, all right, more productively. I think that's That's what I'm trying to basically say. If we can embrace that, find new ways of creating these jobs that are more meaningful, that are more impactful. Like for instance, in healthcare, if you were to ask me whether robots would be taking over every single job in healthcare itself, I'll say no, right? Because in healthcare, the nurses, the doctors, they require empathy, right? How to relate? How do you break a news to a patient who's suddenly be diagnosed with cancer? Imagine that news being broken by a robot, right? That's not possible, all right? So in certain areas, but the diagnosis, the speed in which we can come to that accurate diagnosis, all right, married up with the knowledge that the doctor has, the patient environment and his family situation, and breaking that news and helping work through that issue with the patient, that's still very much human at the end of the day.
Fengyuan?
Yeah, I think I agree, and I think you have to look at the kind of long arc of technology. When the telegraphers emerged, they were worried about horse riders who were sending posts and what happens to their jobs. When the internet was created, people were worried about loss of jobs as well. And I think AI is just that next phase and the next evolution. And I see it as human beings will have infinite wants and desires, so there will be new things to create and new jobs as a result of new products that human beings want. So I think on that front, I don't think we should be worried. But you talked about the fear of AI, and I think with any new technology, when you don't quite understand how it works, there's always inherent fear. And I give you an example. Like, we've used AI in autopilot for flying planes for a long time. And under the recent issues with Boeing and autopilot, we risk our lives and put it in the hands of AI, right? Your pilot friends will tell you most of the times it's the machine that's landing the plane, not the human being. And so I think it's a matter of trust with new technology. And I think what doesn't help AI is that often it's seen as a black box, that it's seen that you don't really know what's going on inside, partly because these algorithms are increasingly complicated. You don't just have one or two parameters, you've got millions of parameters. And they're so non-linear that you change one knob and then the whole result changes. And I think that's the stage that AI is at. But if you trust your surgeon to do a complex surgery, do you really understand, or can he really explain all the cuts and all the decisions he made in the surgery? Well, no, but you trust him because he's got a track record, and over time that trust is engendered. So I think the onus is on AI technologists to really make AI more explainable, to be very careful about what data it's trained on for unintended biases to come in. And there's a lot of active research in this area, and there's no reason why these things can't be made more explicit. I would go so far as to say that I'm actually more optimistic about explaining the results of AI than explaining the human mind. So, when you and I make certain decisions, we are taking data from our childhood, from all the years of experience. But how that influences our decision is very hard to detect. Even if you have a very complicated neural network, there are ways to govern, to log, to instrument the way your data is being run, the way your machine learning algorithms are being built, that gives you a better idea of how this decision was derived. What data was it trained on? What were the steps that were taken? And so I almost think the other way around, that I believe that when this whole research into fairness, explainability, and bias in AI is finally mature, I think AI will be able to address these issues far better than we can for human minds. So that's my take on it.
I think a very interesting point you talked about how the process is sometimes more important than the actual model of AI. So how are you developing, how is it going to make a decision? And that helps to explain a lot about the models we are talking about. Sure. Sinuhe?
I think technologies have had a positive net impact in the labor market since ever, right? More jobs have been created and more jobs have been destroyed. True, some new jobs have been created and people required to adapt and to train and learn those skills. But the net outcome in society has also been positive, right? Our quality of life has increased, and we can focus on more value-adding cognitive tasks, if you will. So I think, yeah, our life is going to change. We are talking really about jobs that some of them didn't even exist, to Oliver's point, 5 years ago. And we don't know which are the ones that are going to exist 5 years from now. But if we just take comfort on the fact that, in the past this trend has been sustained and we've created more jobs and our life quality has been improved, well, we should have no fear. It's just like ride the wave, enjoy it, get trained, learn, get the positive outcome out of this, right?
So I think you and Oliver, you raised a very interesting point about the skill in the world, and a world which will be more augmented going forward. Skills become more and more important, and as a current generation, you should not be, I mean, if you are not getting continuously skilled, you are most likely going to get permanently killed. So, so with that, how do you see, and what type of skills do you think are needed in a world which is getting more and more augmented as we go along?
So the question is, what kind of skills do we need to live in an AI world? Let me start off with by answering that question from a culture perspective. All right. First of all, I think I would encourage, especially my kids. I've got 3 kids, which I encourage them to embrace AI, not fear that. To look at data. Have a very data-driven culture itself. I mean, when we talk about things, look at the data itself, right? Look at the metrics. Try to understand the significance of the numbers. So if you look at my own way of teaching my kids, all right, I'm telling them, right, embrace technology. So take out some ML courses. My eldest kid, he loves robotics. Right? So I've encouraged him to attend courses on robotics itself and understand what robots can do. So if you look at the jobs that's going to come in future, which is very much going to be equipped or augmented, right word, okay, by artificial intelligence. It's really appreciating what the technology can do for you, understand the output, which is very much data-driven, so that you can make better decisions. So skills like data analytics. You don't really need to be a hard coder, okay, because there are companies like Taiger as well as Basis AI that can actually do a lot of that heavy lifting, including Visenze as well. So look in terms of what we can consume out from these models, and be smarter in the way that we use these data to enrich our daily lives or serve the audiences or serve your stakeholders, to make a really positive impact.
Fengyuan?
Yeah, I think one of the key things with technology is to try and understand what goes on underneath the hood. And I think, hey, the AI algorithm is able to recognize faces, facial recognition, right? How does that happen? Like, what it's done is it's taken an image which has pixels, which is 256 by 256, and every pixel there has a red, green, blue value. So essentially it creates a cube of numbers. And it takes that cube of numbers and then puts it into an algorithm. And, so without getting, into the code or the details, I think having some intuition about what these algorithms are doing, how they're transforming an image into a cube of numbers and then feeding it through a learning algorithm, some intuition around what goes on, I think is very important, because then you're able to distinguish what's fantasy and what's possibility. And then I think if you understand what's going on a bit better, then you fear technology a bit less. So that's what I would suggest.
Sure. Sinuhe?
I think Fengyuan said before, the appetite for innovation and for new technologies is intrinsic to humans, to humankind, right? So I think STEM is going to remain a very, very important part of the skills that are going to be needed in the future to understand what we do now, to understand and to do the things and create the innovations that we want to have in the future. Maybe the job 5 years from now is not data science, is something else. But the skills are going to be, those core skills are going to be needed. Which takes me to the next more important skill that I think we all need, which is the ability to learn, to continuously learn and train ourselves and keep up with the pace. Because as Oliver said, I mean, you cannot believe that the job you're doing today is going to be the same 5 years or 10 years down the road, and I'm comfortably sitting here, and that's going to be my life. And then the third part, I tend to divide hard skills and soft skills, right? And the hard skills, we all agree, is very important, but I see also the soft skills becoming very, very relevant. Those perceptions, that negotiation, that empathy, that ability to communicate a concept with effectiveness. I think that is going to become very, very important also as we move into, not having to do these heavy lifting, low value adding tasks that don't contribute to our development and our career path. So that would be my broad answer.
No, I think it's a very well put thoughts about this, because I always believe it's not the machines which take away your job, it's always a lack of adaptability and the lack of willingness to learn further, which will basically kill the market for people who are not willing to do that. So since we have a bit more time, just wanted to ask a quick question about how do you see the role of governments in all these? Because especially we talked a bit about earlier about the data flows and all those various aspects. There are a lot of technical issues involved, but how do you basically help the workforce of the future to accept the technology? And how do you see the role of government in all that?
I think, skills and education, I think, is a big part of it. And I think that's where this idea that you're not going to be in the same job as you are, 10, 15 years down the road. And I think kind of skills retraining, whether it's for a career transition or just to understand technology deeper, I think is one role where I think governments should play, and I think the Singapore government's already doing in a big way. I think the other aspect is just frameworks and policies for regulation. So I think, in Singapore, there's a kind of model AI governance framework that's been published. It's won kind of a whole bunch of awards, and I think it's because they've been very thoughtful about how do you accelerate the use of AI without stymieing it, right? And so governance is a means to accelerate technology rather than to impede it. And I think those are the kind of two important things about the role that governments can play.
Yeah, so the government plays a very, very important role. If I could distill it down to two roles, is either a proactive role or reactionary role. Reactionary role is if something happens, then jump in and fix it, all right, so that it doesn't happen again. A preemptive role, more proactive role, is really thinking forward about the jobs that don't exist today. For the students who have entered elementary schools up until the day that they graduate, what are we doing to equip these students with the necessary knowledge and skills to be in those jobs that don't exist today in 10 years, 15 years' time? That is the role of the government, all right, to think forward. Because if the government doesn't think forward, who else will? Private enterprise? So there is a bigger social, I don't know what's the right word for it, mission, all right, that we need to be responsible, because AI is going to change us, like it or not. The train is coming, or the train is gone, okay? So we have to embrace that and start thinking forward whilst we still have the time to do that. When jobs are displaced and that same job or that person who has been displaced in a job has got no new job to go into, that is a dysfunctional reflection of planning. We have not planned forward for this person whose job has been displaced. All right, so I've always looked at government as a very important catalyst, as a very important actor in this AI world itself. It's not just the private enterprise. Private enterprise will always find new innovations. Government sets the level playing field, ensures that data is openly available, ensures that frameworks are there, so there is no some sinister experiment somewhere, in Singapore or elsewhere that's trying to clone the human DNA and trying to create somebody on that. Okay, and that's Hollywood science fiction stuff, but there is some fear on it. But put frameworks around it that encourages innovation. All right. But there's also, the fear that too much government intervention actually stifles innovation. So the government has to play a very delicate and balancing role over here.
So thanks a lot for the feedback. I think we are out of time as well. So it's been a great discussion about, and I hope the audience has actually realized that it's neither the science fiction and it's neither the fear. It's somewhere in between where we are, and that's the reality of not only now but even the near future. So with that, give a huge round of applause to the panel. Thanks a lot.